What's going on, guys? My name's Colin, I'm a footwear designer, and today we're taking a look at the Nike Air Jordan 6. MJ won his first ever championship wearing the Air Jordan 6, and it's considered to be one of the best Jordan models of all time. So today, we're taking a look to see if there's anything on the inside that helped MJ out. Gotta be the shoes, right? We're hopefully gonna answer why everyone loves these shoes, and I'm gonna show you why I think this is the perfect case study in athlete feedback and implementation. In 1990, the Chicago Bulls and Michael Jordan had lost in the Eastern Conference Finals to their rivals, the Detroit Pistons, and it was time for the designer of the Jordan line, Tinker Hatfield, to go back to the drawing board to upgrade the 5 to the 6. Michael Jordan had a lot of input on his shoes, especially when Tinker took over the line. So what was the inspiration? What are the improvements and updates? At the time, MJ really loved his Porsche 911, and Tinker styled the shoe after that car. Michael Jordan also gave Tinker direct orders to have a clean toe box. No more stitch panels like every Jordan has had since. The Air Jordan 1, the 2, the 3, the 4, and the 5 all have a toe box rand with stitching. Michael wasn't having it. So Tinker Hatfield made sure that the Air Jordan 6 had a reinforcement around the toe, but only one smooth upper piece, making the Air Jordan 6 the first model to obtain this. Tinker had also noticed that MJ had problems putting on the past 5 models quickly on the sidelines. So Tinker designed 2 holes on the top of the tongue and 1 loop on the back, calling it a spoiler, and reinforced them with rubberized construction. MJ didn't want the heel loop to hit his Achilles tendon like the Jordan 4 does for so many people. So Tinker positioned it with a stark outward curve so it wasn't anywhere near MJ's Achilles, but still functioned as a pull. When the Air Jordan 5 was initially released, Nike got a lot of complaints about kids slipping and falling on courts due to its translucent outsole rubber. It picked up dust and made the sole slippery. So Tinker broke up the sections of translucent rubber, adding more solid rubber to the sole to make it more grippy and durable. It's also worth noting that this was the last Jordan to feature Nike branding. It's almost an end of an era. After they had all the feedback and everything from Michael Jordan and implemented it into the shoe, in February 1991, the Air Jordan 6 was debuted at the All-Star Game and released to the public originally in 5 colorways at the price of $125. Michael immediately started wearing them for the end of the season playoff push, and the Bulls finished 61-21 first in the Eastern Conference. Michael Jordan won the scoring title with 2,580 points scored, was on the All-Star defensive first team, and won the MVP award. Clearly, the shoes were helping his game, but that meant nothing until the playoffs. MJ wore the famous infrared black colorway of the Air Jordan 6 in the playoffs to represent that he was locked in and ready to go, which he definitely was, because the Bulls breezed through the New York Knicks 3-0, the Philadelphia 76ers 4-1, and finally made it over the hump of the Eastern Conference Finals, beating the rival Detroit Pistons 4-0. The Pistons were so upset at the sweep that they decided to walk off the court instead of finishing the game. The 91 Finals, MJ had to play his idol Magic Johnson and the Lakers, a perennial powerhouse team. But the shoes must have kept MJ locked in because the Bulls won 4-1, giving MJ and the Bulls their first championship, and that became the start of the Bulls dynasty. Could it have been done without the shoes? Probably. But new tech and player-specific specifications always help an athlete focus on their craft and their game rather than their equipment. So now we know the story of the shoes, what they are, but do the tech advancements really help? Is it the shoes? It's gotta be the shoes. I thought it was important to note here too that when you're releasing a new shoe year over year, it's really hard to incorporate all the needed improvements before the next model needs to be put into production for release. Usually the way that these companies work, by the time they get the feedback on the existing model, the other one has already started production. In a lot of ways, all of these new improvements on the Jordan 6 are things that Michael disliked about the 4 mostly, and the 5 only sort of. The 6 truly encapsulates all the best advancements that were specifically tailored to MJ.
As a small business, how do we justify as deep of a discount as 30% off for our scratch and dent sale? Well, let me show you how we're able to do that, how it really helps us reduce our waste. Because we've got bins and bins full of scraps that look just like these scraps, where you've got some over dye, you got some barbed wire scars, and usually we'd have to completely throw away a piece just like this. As you can see, you've got some like a brand there, you got some barbed wire scars, but because this is still perfectly sound structurally, the leather's perfectly fine, it's just cosmetically flawed, we can now cut pieces out of that. Where now you've just got a little bit of that brand in there, it's not so far into the brand where it's really cut deep, and you have just a few character marks from the barbed wire scars. And to me, I like this more. You know, it shows the history of the leather. It helps us reduce our waste. You're actually reminded that it's an animal's skin that turned into leather so that you can wear a harness that happened to be in the Tornado movie this year. So if you want 30% off our products, get them while they last, because we're just limited on supply because they all comes from our scratch and dent piles. and check it out below, 30% off.
The brand is Jordan. The style is the 6 Retro White Black. They come in at 1 pound, 2.9 ounces. They're $199.99, and they're made in China. Nike says that MJ wore them when he claimed his first championship, and you'll be wearing them for, well, whatever you want. These sneakers bring throwback style to any fit. Lace up and let your kicks do the talking. Well, that's what Nike says, but if you're interested in a pair of these Air Jordan 6s, use the links below. There's a note in here for me that says that Sam thought that the shoes smelled like a plastic water bottle that had been left in the sun when he first opened the box. I think it's obvious that it's a blend of synthetic and real leather, but I'm gonna let Weston take over from here and let you know what he thinks about the leather.
When it comes to the leather quality on this Jordan, it's kind of all over the place. There's 3 different types of leather in this single shoe. You've got this more shiny, slightly tumbled leather in the toe and kind of getting through here. You've got this really soft and supple leather. It's your classic buttery leather through these little eye stays. And then right here at the top, you've got maybe the worst leather I've seen in any Nike or any Jordan of all time. Look how loose that grain is. It's all wrinkly and nasty. You even just move it a little bit and it looks like your grandma's arm skin. And that's because it's just a really cheap leather. If you look at the cross section, it's really, really loose and floppy. There's not a lot of grain in it, and that heavy plastic coating causes that separation of the real leather underneath from that fake pigment on top. It separates because it's such a weak and cheap leather that's what gives you that really nasty look. The other leathers aren't really terrible for Nike, you know, pretty on par. The better leather out of the 2 remaining leathers is this, what would you call it? Just a little bit, actually, there might be another type of leather on this too, actually, because I don't think that goes under. Hold on, pause. It is a different piece of leather. So there's 4 different kinds of leather on this shoe, because you've got this slightly tumbled leather, you've got this really tumbled leather, you got your typical Nike leather, and then you have this really, really cheap, ugly, nasty leather. So 4 different types of leathers, 4 different tempers of leather, and honestly for 4 different purposes, because on the toe, you've got that partially tumbled one that's probably the highest quality out of the bunch. It's the thickest, I believe, at like 2.8. There's a little bit of a backer on it, so it's a little bit thinner than it reads at 2. It's probably more like 1.8. Your next best leather is probably just your standard Nike leather, because this tumble leather is more for the accents, covering those seams and giving you a little bit more support for the eyelets, is really, really thin. It's only 1.2 millimeters thick. And you could swap the 2, you know, it's splitting hairs to some degree, but one that is clearly the worst is this. That's just an unforgivable sin to put that on any kind of leather product. That is the worst leather you could put on a shoe. So anything from the worst leather that Nike's ever put on a shoe up to some pretty decent leather.
Like I said, Tinker was trying to make these shoes easy to put on and easy to lace up. So they utilized a lace lock, or a lace keeper, if you will, to make it easy to put the shoes on. In practice, it's a little less practical. You probably just want to tie your shoes like normal. However, the tongue pulls on the front work very well. It has a large rubberized patch on the front to reinforce the holes that you put your fingers in to create kind of the pull situation. And the combination of that and then the stiff rubber spoiler on the back, it makes it super easy to get into these shoes, almost like a boot. Comparing the back pull tab to the 4, the shape is definitely way more intentional to avoid the Achilles. If you look at the Jordan 4, the wing on the back tab kind of just juts all the way up. It really is all up in your Achilles. If you dorsiflex your foot while wearing a pair of Jordan 4s that has the stiffer heel tab, you could get cut up or get irritated pretty easily. We decided to do the pull tab on those pulls, and we did the back tab, and it tested right around 273 pounds, and then the tongue ripped the rest of the tongue off at 127 pounds. I don't know how often you're gonna be exerting 100 plus pounds of force on your shoes, but if you do, make sure you go a little stronger on the back tab than you do on the tongue. We also did the breathability test, and the tongue has lots of smaller holes inside of a stretchy fabric. It's actually a really nice gusseted tongue that goes a pretty far ways down. It's quite breathable. See all of that smoke coming up through. Moving to the insole, it is one of those Nike Dream Cell insoles, which I'm not actually sure what it's made out of. Obviously it's a foam, but they are actually very comfortable. A lot of needed comfort in retro Jordans these days. If you take out that insole, you see something that you don't actually see in sneakers, and I haven't seen this on any Jordans, but they are board lasted and they're not traditionally Strobel stitched. So what is board lasting versus a Strobel? A Strobel stitch is where the upper is simply stitched to the lasting board and then that Strobel material is glued to the midsole. Well, board lasting is more of a traditional way of lasting where you pull all the upper material underneath the lasting board and glue it down. Usually boots and nicer shoes will traditionally nail or stitch them, but these are most likely just glued in place. But if you see a big piece of material with no stitching, that's board lasted, And I almost wonder if it's required for them to board last this because of that clean toe that Jordan wanted. It has to be that one full smooth piece that's pulled and tucked underneath. It also makes these shoes incredibly stiff. It is very hard to bend them. Compared to the Air Jordan 15, which you can basically bend in half even though it has a shank, this board lasting makes this shoe very stiff, which I imagine would make it a little bit more responsive on the court. It might be good for an athlete, probably not good if you're just walking around. That's due to the fact that a floppier shoe will transfer less of your energy back to you. Flexible shoes will give you more comfort, but stiff shoes will improve your performance. They're typically found in running shoes as stability features for overpronation, but also in racing shoes. On the ball drop test, the midsole performed at 9.1 inches, which is the lower half of all tests. I'm not trying to pull the wool over anyone's eyes. Retro Jordans are not very comfortable these days. They have a PU foam midsole with a heel unit. And back in the day, they used to have a front air unit as well. It'll be interesting to see when we get these in half if they actually still have those front units. Like we saw on the Air Jordan 15, they're kind of cheaping out. There's no longer a zoom unit in the front. These are just air, however. The outsole looks like it's maybe made of 3 different rubber types. The blue is measuring at 70 Shore A, the black 74 Shore A, and the Jordan logo is 90 Shore A. On the bar drop test, the outsole performed at 5 inches, so the bottom quarter of all tests. And then on the visible air unit, the PSI test was here. All right, really interesting. They look like they're board lasted. There's some interesting added components, but let's see on the inside if these have some extra zoom or air units or something that really propelled Jordan forward into getting his first championship. We got them cut in half. Let's take a look. As you can tell on the inside, it does have that 4-foot air unit. I'm really impressed. I'm really glad that Nike is still putting the 4-foot air unit in these, even though it's not really performance these days, but they're true to the originals. They had 4-foot units and then also the heel air unit. On the inside, you can also see how far that tongue goes down into the gusset. It's actually really nice. It provides a good amount of lockdown and aids in getting this shoe on quite easily. Relatively thick on the Dreamcell insole too. That's really nice. You can also tell on the cross section here that the board for the board lasting is pretty thick, which makes sense. That's why it's so rigid. It's got that thick piece of board material with all of the upper components wrapped underneath. Again, I think because of that clean toe, they really had to board last this instead of Strobel stitching it. It also makes it more durable there, you know? Usually when you have added stitching, you have an added area of failure, so you could blow out through the tip of your shoe if you do that. They wrapped that material all the way underneath, so adds an extra level of durability and protection there. I think another thing that's really interesting always to see on Air Max and airbag related shoes is just how much foam encapsulates the rest of those air units. Like if we were able to extract this air unit out, it would look pretty large, and it looks that way from the outside too. It looks like fully uninterrupted, but all the voids are filled up with foam, which usually means that those air units feel pretty stiff underfoot. And then the last thing, I'm not really too impressed by the heel counter on these. I think it's pretty stiff, but it looks relatively thin compared to all of the new modern basketball shoes that we've been seeing. So I guess heel counters have just come a far ways since Michael Jordan got his first championship. I think the Air Jordan 6 is a piece of history. It is a time capsule of where technology was back in the day, but it's also a case study in user feedback, really. All of those implemented, all of those technologies, all of those new little tweaks here and there, those quality of life improvements for Michael Jordan, they could all equate to essentially Michael not having to worry about his shoes and focusing on his game and getting his championship. So are they worth it? Well, for $199, guess $200 for a pair of shoes is expensive, but Jordans have kind of always been expensive. They are luxury performance basketball shoes, and that's what they continue to be to this day. Hopefully we're gonna cut up a pair of the new Air Jordan 39s that just came out. To me, I love the Air Jordan 6. I think it is the perfect case study in user feedback and tailoring a design to a specific need, and that need is performance for a high-performing athlete like Michael Jordan. Let me know how I did in the comments down below, guys. Thank you so much. Peace.